Anti-capitalist protesters at the G20 summit in Hamburg are trying to push world leaders very far to the left, but look at socialist Venezuela. Is that what we want for the Western world? Emily Jashinsky and Wendy Osefo join us now. Well, Emily, maybe Angela Merkel, a lot of people were wondering, why would she have this in Hamburg? Because Hamburg is where a lot of these radical organizations in Europe are based. We knew there were going to be protests. Maybe she did the world a favor by showing us the face of some of the radical left in Europe.
Yeah, I actually think that's a good point. I think there's some value in exposing, especially the American public, to the far left protest culture that Europe has, very differently than even what we have here. And when you look at certainly what's happening in Europe right now, high unemployment, slow economic growth, the last thing they should want is the solutions that these far left protesters would have, which is expanded government.
Yeah.
Really, that's what they should be protesting against.
Emily, it's very interesting that President Trump is not so well received in Western Europe, but in Eastern Europe, they were chanting, "Go Trump." The countries that really had real life experience with a socialist system, they seem to understand the Trump message better than Western Europe does.
Yeah, that's true. And if you look over sort of Eastern Europe, who do they have statues to? Ronald Reagan.
That was actually for Wendy. Go ahead, Wendy.
Well, actually, protesting is part of the thread in which makes up the fabric of any democracy. But when it does get unhinged, we have to start to question the method. However, we do see that there has been violence and uprisings from the right wing as well, whether that was on May 19th of this year, where right-wing agitators stormed the German ministry, or whether in March of 2016, where right-wing agitators again decided to throw firebombs and explosives at police officers. So
yeah, but Wendy, you look at the size of the crowds. I mean, there's no real comparison. Again, to my question, it's interesting that the countries that literally had to deal with socialism for decades, they seem to be very friendly to Trump. It's the Western Europeans who haven't actually had to live under real socialism where you find the hatred of Trump.
I don't think it's necessarily a hatred or a love for Trump. I think that each region, whether it's the western side of Europe or the eastern side of Europe, has their own grievances. And at the end of the day, no one is necessarily saying that what Trump is doing is something in which that they love. I think that there's more so this fanfare for Trump that we have seen.
Emily,
I don't think it drills down to the policies.
What I'm concerned with, and what this segment is about, is the fanfare for socialism, which seems to be what a lot of these protesters favor. When you look at all the examples in Europe, I mean, side by side with Western Europe, their Eastern European neighbors had to deal with socialism. And I don't think it's coincidental that Trump received a much better reception there.
No, I agree, and especially when you look at what it's done to their economy. And obviously, when you look at what Venezuela is right now, the protests, the violent protests, the tragic protests, there is really no better case study or really cautionary tale of the dangers of socialism and of the dangers of government control over the markets. And so I think they would do themselves a favor to look there and to learn from that example and to stop trying to bring that to their own countries and cause suffering among their own people.
Wendy, we have seen these protesters so often, just about every time there is a big international meeting, whether it's in Europe or over here, et cetera. And I'm always wondering, don't these people have jobs? I mean, they've got a lot of time on their hands, no?
A good question. But for some people, they don't have jobs. And I think that that's part of the problem. So you actually speak directly to that.
But how can you do that if you don't have, I mean, these people are very able-bodied. Most of them are very able-bodied people that could presumably get a job if they wanted to, right?
And I think that's where the frustration is that they are able-bodied people, but their government is not creating opportunities for them to be able to get jobs. And I think that you just hit right on the point of what their frustration really lies upon.
Yeah, well, Emily, I think the government over in Europe gives them plenty of opportunities to take various forms of welfare, which gives them the time to go to demonstrations like this.
I was going to say that's sort of the one thing, the notion that the government isn't giving them their opportunities. Well, the government should get out of the way and the opportunities will come. We know that's how that happens. We know jobs are not created by government and jobs are created by free markets. So that's really the key point.
Emily and Wendy, great to see you on this Saturday morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, David.
The Russian president